Miasto to ludzie, miasto to przestrzeń.
A city consists of the people connected to it, who reside here,
są z nim związani,
who work here,
którzy tutaj mieszkają,
who live
którzy
here,
tutaj pracują, którzy tutaj żyją, którzy są w jakiś
who
sposób
are emotionally attached to the city in some way.
związani z miastem, które nie jest dla nich tylko i wyłącznie miejscem
It is not just a place of commuting between home and work for them.
I pracą. Natomiast miasto to jest oczywiście też przestrzeń.
However, a city is also a physical space. It is physical tissue that can sometimes be very difficult to manage, because in one place you often have to reconcile very conflicting interests. But it is also a place that brings people together, and that is why it is so important, and I believe this is of great value, that we, here in Warsaw, as well as colleagues in other Polish cities, invest heavily in public spaces. For me, a city is a place and a space for living, a complex organism, but also a beautiful one. I believe that Warsaw is a very authentic city, and I think that's what makes me feel so good here. It's an organism where different tissues interconnect. When we think of the countryside, we think of peace and connecting with nature. And in the city, of course, you can also connect with nature. But there are so many other factors that make life here dynamic, yet at the same time so diverse that it is hard to compare a city to anything else.
Trudno porównać miasto z czymkolwiek chyba innym.
What we often hear when talking to foreigners living in Poland is that many of them recall their time living in our country as one of the best times, if they no longer live here. A large number of them are satisfied with living in Poland. The reality is much better than the expectations they had, and it holds up even when compared to other places in Europe or around the world where these people could choose to live.
Innymi miejscami w Europie czy na świecie, które ci ludzie mają jako możliwość do wyboru, do miejsca zamieszkania. Rzeczą, która też jest
Another very good thing, one of the great strengths of our country, is that we have several large metropolises, each of which is truly unique and offers something different to its residents.
Każda z nich jest unikalna i każda z nich daje coś innego mieszkańcom.
Development is not limited to just the capital, as is the case in some other countries. We have strong regional centers such as Kraków, Wrocław, Poznań, or Gdańsk in the Tri-City, and each of these areas is a little different, each with its own characteristics. But what they all have in common is that they are undergoing a transformation into places that genuinely offer a high quality of life, good living and working conditions, and good conditions for doing business.
Dobre warunki do zamieszkania i do pracy, dobre warunki do prowadzenia biznesu. I ta zmiana
This change is happening very quickly. What really made me understand what a city is were the scenes, I don't know if you remember, from the pandemic, when the streets were empty. It was then that I very clearly saw that a city is not the buildings, not the investments. A city is activity. Without the hustle and bustle, without the sounds of people living here. There are no streets of Lower or Upper Wrzeszcz without the crafts, without activity. There is no city without civic engagement, without non-governmental organizations. We all knew this on some level, but I think the pandemic made it even clearer. Gdańsk is a city of freedom and solidarity, and these two elements, these values, are building blocks of our community. Freedom also means openness, curiosity about the world, and the search for innovations. It's not the case that some official can just create or invent an innovation by saying, now Gdańsk will be the best in XYZ. The key to this is, above all, the community of people. Of course, joining the European Union was a milestone on the development map for most cities in Poland. For us, in Gdańsk, Euro 2012 was such a milestone. But I would say not only because a lot of infrastructure was built, though it was. The stadium was built, some of the largest museums were built, and new road and communication systems were established. But more importantly, we changed our mindset. We realized that if we want to, we are capable of executing projects professionally, sometimes even more professionally than cities or countries in old Europe. Today, Gdańsk can compete with the biggest cities in Europe. In my opinion, Gdańsk is one of the most important cities, if not aspiring to the most important role among the cities on the Baltic Sea. The Gdańsk of today and the Gdańsk of 20 years ago are two completely different cities. When it comes to revitalization in Gdańsk, there are several areas currently undergoing revitalization. Revitalization is not limited to a specific building or specific tissue. It is a process made up of many aspects, including social ones. And this is addressed in a multifaceted way, meaning the city simultaneously tries to improve the functionality of its infrastructure, and that most buildings in these areas, which are largely historical, are undergoing various restoration and adaptation processes. The revitalization of spaces results in greater resident activity. New public spaces, paths, and greenery are being introduced, and new services are moving in. These parts of the city are coming back to life. So spaces that were once degraded and avoided by both residents and tourists are now becoming attractive again, not only visually, but also economically. We can confidently say that we are no longer, and I don't know if we ever were, but we are certainly not a backwater. We are a European city where service in English or German is commonplace, where guests from abroad feel comfortable and cared for. Modern cultural facilities and museums, which also have exhibits with audio guides in English, German, and many other languages, mean that people no longer come here just to walk around the beautiful main city or spend time on the beach, but they can now actively engage with cultural institutions and understand the stories we want to share with them. We are part of Europe, and I think this is also part of the change we have noticed. Museums are no longer places where you just keep silent and put on slippers. They are places where you spend time with your children. We are trying to encourage children to not get bored in museums. This is incredible because it is a conscious development of products, or rather, treating history as a product. History from different periods and scopes, and hopefully, the child we inspire today will one day return here with their own family and pass on that enthusiasm, whether they are from Gdańsk, from Pomerania, or from other countries.
Niezależnie od tego, czy jest z Gdańska, z Pomorza, czy też z innych krajów.
There is no more genuine form of promotion than ambassadors in the form of residents who go out into the world. And to become an ambassador, you must know your city. Thanks to the Gdańsk Resident Card project, we are encouraging residents to explore the city's tourist attractions. On the other hand, for us, it is an amazing research tool that allows us to ask questions about the significance of the tourism industry. Over 85% of residents rate tourism positively or very positively, recognizing its contribution to the local economy. In fact, on average, 1 in 4 residents of our city works directly or indirectly in the tourism industry, which is a large percentage and also shows how much the industry has strengthened in recent years, not only in terms of attractiveness, but also economically. This used to be an old sheet metal warehouse in the 1920s, 30s, and 40s, when they were building submarines. Now it is one of the largest food halls in northern Poland. We are at the European Solidarity Center, This is one of the most modern museums in Gdańsk and one of the most modern museums in Poland. It's a great combination of old walls, an old building with a modern interior and equipment, an example of how modern residential buildings coexist with a structure from the 1920s. The museum commemorates the events that took place in Gdańsk at the shipyard in the 1980s, including the strike and the breakthrough of the Solidarity movement. I am 44 years old and have lived in Gdańsk for 44 years. I belong to a niche of people who have been Gdańsk natives for several generations. Hobby-wise, I am a guide, and now I also guide people through the shipyard, sharing a bit of my own history as well. Being a guide has become my hobby, my passion. As a true Gdańsk native, born and raised, I had a great need to get to know my city, so I kept reading and wanting to learn more. I was like a tourist in my own city. Over time, as friends from different cities started visiting, I naturally told them different stories. Of course, I bored my whole family with all the historical details. It was all very incoherent. I just talked about whatever we passed by in the city. 7 years ago, I partnered with an organization that organizes tours of Gdańsk, and it brings me immense joy to share the fascinating stories of my city, of both the buildings and the people. It is absolutely wonderful to live in Gdańsk, and I recommend it to many young people who are looking for a path in life. Perhaps they are looking for a place to study or live, because this is a place that offers so much. There is a wide range of educational options, a very large job market, and a fantastic climate in terms of both weather and people. Gdańsk is certainly not unique in its direction of development, as cities like Wrocław, Katowice, and Kraków have followed a similar path. In these cities, as in Gdańsk, shared service centers have developed, attracting foreign workers and large corporations. So one could say that Gdańsk's development reflects how Poland has developed in recent years. Just as our infrastructure has evolved, so has our thinking about ecological sustainability and how a city should develop in a balanced way. And the same is happening in Kraków, Wrocław, or Poznań. One thing I think is also worth highlighting is that our cities, and in fact Poland in general, have become one of the largest global players in providing business services. We are one of the strongest players in the world. In the largest cities, hundreds of thousands of people are employed in various types of business services. These are generally corporate, legal, and accounting services. Poland's accession to the European Union in 2004 was a fundamental step, as it changed several things that I believe are crucial for the country's functioning today, even if we sometimes don't realize it. Firstly, Polish companies became European companies. Anything produced in Poland immediately gained the branding of a European product, which is generally associated with high quality around the world. At the same time, a model emerged where many of our companies became part of the supply chain for other companies, mainly in Western Europe, especially German ones, allowing Polish businesses to build their positions through the success of these other companies. That was one thing that helped greatly. The second thing is that we became a very attractive choice for anyone looking to invest in Europe. As a member of the European Union, we immediately gained access to the common market and all the benefits that come with it. But there are also things people don't think about on a daily basis, like the enforcement of economic judicial rules and the flow of capital, which are vital for doing business. So many investments in Poland were made because the country became fully integrated into the bloodstream of the European economy.
Gospodarki europejskiej już na pełnych prawach.
Jeżeli chodzi o innowacyjne rozwiązania, to
When it comes to innovative solutions,
według mnie jest to
I think they lean
ukłon,
toward
w
more
stronę
green,
zieleni,
people-friendly
w
spaces.
stronę,
We are
tworzenia
starting to
takich
move away from the
przestrzeni
so-called concrete jungle
przyjaznych ludziom.
and truly recognize the need for greenery and the
Trochę
benefits it
zaczynamy
brings.
odchodzić od tej takiej
Importantly,
tak
in
zwanej
investments,
betonozy,
including
faktycznie
real estate development,
dostrzegamy
where there's a big push for
potrzebę
profit and building as many
przebywania
apartments
w
as possible,
zieleni i
developers are noticing
korzyści z
that
tego
residents
płynących.
expect green
Co
spaces,
ważne, w
common
inwestycjach
areas,
także
and playgrounds for
deweloperskich,
children.
tak, czyli jakby stricte prywatnych, gdzie jest
As a
duży
city,
nacisk
we're
na to,
constantly
żeby było
seeking
jak
new
najwięcej
locations for
mieszkań.
green areas.
Tam też
We're also continuing our
deweloperzy
policy
widzą
of
to,
greening
że
the main
mieszkańcy
communication
tego
routes to
oczekują,
create a
że
critical mass
oczekują
of greenery
przestrzeni zielonych,
that
przestrzeni
fulfills the goals of
wspólnych,
green and
placy
blue
zabaw dla
infrastructure in
dzieci.
the city.
Jako miasto poszukujemy
The
ciągle
result
nowych
of this will be a
lokalizacji
city's
terenów
greater ability to
Ciągle
adapt to
prowadzimy
climate change.
politykę zazieleniania, na przykład głównych tras komunikacyjnych. Właśnie
Let's
po to,
remember
aby
that greenery
zbudować, że
plays
tak
a
powiem,
very
tą masę
positive role
zieleni,
here, as we can
która,
improve, among
no,
others,
wypełni nam te
rainwater
zalecenia
retention.
dotyczące właśnie zielonej, niebieskiej infrastruktury, jej obecności w mieście i co przez to jakby osiągniemy, to jest lepsza zdolność miasta do adaptacji do zmian klimatu. Pamiętajmy, że zieleń tutaj działa bardzo, można powiedzieć, dobrze w tym zakresie. A z drugiej strony mamy możliwość lepszej retencji wód deszczowych.
Dzisiaj wydaje się,
Today,
że ta nowoczesność
modernity
to jest
seems to be linked with
nowoczesność
nature.
powiązana z naturą.
Modern cities are those
Nowoczesne
that live in
miasta to
harmony
są
with
miasta,
nature,
które żyją w
which seek
zgodzie,
symbiosis with
z
greenery,
naturą, które szukają
with
symbiozy
flora and fauna,
z,
and which strive to use the
zielenią,
potential of
z
nature as something
fauną,
attractive
florą,
that builds the
które
city's
starają
brand,
się
and which
wykorzystać
strive to use the
potencjał
potential of
natury jako
nature
coś
as something
atrakcyjnego,
attractive that builds the
budującego
city's
markę,
brand.
danego miasta.
Another important
To o tym
aspect
należy
is the
wspomnieć,
development
to
of
jest
accommodation
rozwój
infrastructure,
infrastruktury noclegowej.
relatively new infrastructure,
Relatywnie
which emerged
nowa
after
infrastruktura,
2008
która powstała
2009,
oczywiście po
makes us highly attractive compared to Western
2009
Europe,
roku.
where that
Powoduje, że
infrastructure is
jesteśmy bardzo
relatively
atrakcyjni
old.
w stosunku do Europy
Additionally,
Zachodniej, która
the
to
quality to
infrastruktura ma
price ratio
już
also
relatywnie
distinguishes
starą.
us.
Poza
So
tym
one
stosunek
could say
jakości
that the
do ceny
city
to
has
jest
evolved
coś,
on
co
all
nas,
fronts:
wyróżnia,
transportation
więc,
accessibility,
tak naprawdę można powiedzieć, że miasto
attractiveness of
ewoluowało
buildings,
na wszystkich
but also
frontach.
Euro
Na frontach,
2012 showed the value of
dostępności
investing in
komunikacyjnej,
events.
atrakcyjności obiektowej, ale też Euro 2012 pokazało, że warto inwestować w imprezy, że warto inwestować w wydarzenia. Można powiedzieć, że dzisiaj
Today, in
w roku
2024,
2024
as a
jako
city,
miasto zorganizowaliśmy
we have
wszystkie
organized
największe
all the
imprezy
major
sportowe,
sporting
które
events we
mogliśmy
could,
zorganizować.
including sports such as volleyball,
zarówno w
handball,
różnych dyscyplinach,
soccer,
siatkówka,
and the
piłka
World
ręczna,
Athletics
piłka nożna,
Championships.
czy też Mistrzostwo Świata w lekkoatletyce i to nas otworzyło na wydarzenia artystyczne.
This also
coraz
opened us
więcej
up to
koncertów,
artistic
czy
events,
też
including
transformacja
concerts,
takich wydarzeń,
and the
jak
transformation of
jarmark
events
Dominika
like
czy
St.
jarmark
Dominic's
Boże
Fair or the
Narodzenia,
Christmas Market,
które są
which have become
produktami
global
marki
brands,
światowej,
not
nie
only
tylko
due to their
ze względu
traditions,
na
but
swoją
also their
tradycję, ale
quality,
też ze względu na
content,
swoją jakość,
and the
ze względu na
international
content,
aspect
ze
we've learned to
względu,
embrace.
na też tą międzynarodowość, którą myślę, że się nauczyliśmy robić.
First,
To
in
jest po
hosting these
pierwsze, a po
events,
drugie
and
też,
second, in
odpowiednio
promoting them
promować.
appropriately.
Śmiało i jasno można
It's fair to
powiedzieć,
say
że
that people
ludzie
don't come to a
przyjeżdżają do
city
miasta
just because
dlatego,
there's a
że
nice
tu
hotel,
jest ładny hotel,
but because there's an
ale
event,
dlatego, że tu jest
history,
albo wydarzenie,
or a
albo
place that leaves them with
historia,
unforgettable
albo miejsce,
experiences.
które po prostu zostawia nam albo wypuszcza nas
This also
poza
increases our
samymi
attractiveness.
To też
What's
powoduje
important is that events,
zwiększenie
cultural and
tej naszej
otherwise, support our
atrakcyjności.
openness.
To, co jest ważne, że imprezy,
We're not only talking
wydarzenia,
about high culture
one
events, but also
podtrzymują tą naszą
entertainment,
otwartość. Tu nie
reading
mówimy
events,
tylko o wydarzeniach,
cultural festivals, and more.
z wysokiej kultury, z takich formatów, ale wydarzenia rozrywkowe, wydarzenia czytelnicze, wydarzenia kulturalne, festiwale. Gastronomia jest jednym z najmocniejszych filarów,
Gastronomy is one of
bo,
the strongest pillars because I don't
nie znam
personally know
może
anyone who
lubię
doesn't
jeść,
enjoy eating.
mniej więcej,
Whether
ale
more
są
or
to
less,
zawsze,
it's always a positive experience.
pozytywne wrażenia, które,
Gastronomy
które,
isn't just about taste, but also
zostawiamy.
smell and
Gastronomia to nie
sight.
tylko smak,
The
to-
culture of
to
travel for
węch,
food
to-
is
to
growing
wzrok,
globally in Europe,
i coraz,
and we're strongly maturing to it in
bardziej
Poland.
ta kultura podróży za
More and more
gastronomią,
guests
ona
come to
rośnie światowo,
experience the
rośnie
culinary
europejsko
skills
i
of
też
this or
dojrzewamy
that
mocno
chef
do tego
and
w
to taste
Polsce.
something
Coraz
new.
więcej,
because gastronomy is a journey, and that's something that enriches the tourist atmosphere and the impression of a place.
Żeby posmakować czegoś innego, bo gastronomia to
I
podróż.
think the phrase, which I've heard before and isn't my own, applies to both Poland and Polish cities. Reality here is better than our reputation. It often happens that when someone comes to Poland after a long break or for the first time, they are surprised by the quality of infrastructure, how green it is, especially in our city, where greenery is one of Warsaw's strengths, and how clean and safe it is.
Rzeczywistość u nas jest lepsza niż opinia o nas. Tak? Czyli jakby w Polsce bardzo często to się
These are
pojawia
things we sometimes take for
w
granted,
sytuacji, kiedy
or we focus on what's not working.
Polski po długiej
But
przerwie,
in many respects, we already stand out compared to Western countries. I'd say Poland is small enough to change, yet big enough to have influence.
zielono. Na przykład w naszym mieście zieleń to jest jeden z głównych silnych stron Warszawy. Tego, że jest czysto i bezpiecznie. I to są takie rzeczy, które my czasami traktujemy jako oczywiste, czasami po prostu zwracamy uwagę słusznie, że coś nie domaga. Natomiast nas to naprawdę pod wieloma względami już teraz wyróżnia względem innych krajów zachodnich.
I think Poland is a country that bridges fire and water. On one hand, we can reflect and make changes, but on the other hand, we're large enough for our voice to be heard. We are a creative nation, but also well organized. I think that creative tension, which once was Poland's advertising slogan, has some truth to it. And anyone wondering about it, I encourage them to come and see for themselves what kind of country Poland is, what our major cities look like, and whether this isn't a great place to live.
Kiedyś było hasłem reklamowym Polski. Coś w tym jest. I każdy, kto się zastanawia nad tym, zachęcam do tego, żeby przyjechał i sam zobaczył, jakim krajem jest Polska, jak wyglądają nasze największe miasta, czy to nie jest dobre miejsce do tego, żeby tutaj mieszkać i żyć.